Welcome to a series that we call The End of Times, where we go through the book of Revelation verse by verse to try our best to see what it is we can expect to happen in the end times, or the time Jesus refers to as the end of the age. And as we've gone through the book of Revelation, where we are in this book, is John had been taken up to the throne room of God, where he notices God has a scroll in his hand with 7 seals. What's written within that scroll is the divine coming of his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. It's determined that only Jesus Christ can open that scroll. And as those 7 seals are broken, what we see is events take place on the earth caused by man. God is always in control, and his horsemen are kind of manipulating it, but it is the evil hearts of men that are actually doing it. And what we see is leaders appointed, war, famine, death, and pestilence, and then heavy persecution of Christians. And then once that scroll is open for the first time, we see the wrath of God and the judgment of God on the earth. And it starts with 7 trumpets. And as these trumpets begin to be blasted by 7 angels, the first trumpet, hail and fire, come down and destroy 1/3 of the earth, which is Babylon. Then a meteor hits offshore of this same area, Babylon, and continues to destroy 1/3 of the earth. And then an angel named Wormwood comes down and poisons the hearts of men. And then finally darkness covers 1/3 of the earth. But the other 2/3 of the earth are just kind of standing there watching this in awe. Once that 5th trumpet blasts, now we start to see the rest of the world affected. Angel comes down and opens up the bottomless pit where smoke rips out of it and darkness covers the entire planet. Then many locusts that come out that are spiritual beings led by an angel named Abaddon, who is the king of the bottomless pit, then sting everybody who does not have the mark of God on their forehead. And it causes them so much pain that they want to die. And then the 6th trumpet blasts, and the river Euphrates is dried up, 4 angels are released, and they lead an army of 200 million spiritual warriors who then kill 1/3 of mankind that is remaining. And then after that, John sees then another angel, a mighty angel, come down with a rainbow around him, and he stands with 1 foot on land and 1 foot on the sea, and he starts essentially declaring some things, however, and then we also hear some 7 thunderous voices, which are the spirits of God. And as John begins to write down what he's hearing, a voice from heaven says, "Stop, don't write it down." And that's where we are. So we're just going to pick it up in Revelation 11, verse 8. Then the voice which I heard from heaven spoke to me again and said, "Go take the little book which is open in the hand of the angel who stands on the sea and on the earth." And I went to the angel and said to him, "Give me the little book." And he said to me, "Take and eat it, and it will make your stomach bitter, but it will be as sweet as honey in your mouth." And I took the little book out of the angel's hand and ate it, and it was as sweet as honey in my mouth. But when I had eaten it, my stomach became bitter. And he said to me, "You must prophesy again about many peoples, nations, tongues, and kings." Now I want to start off by saying any time that the Word of God is referred to in the Bible, it's often referred to as being sweet like honey to your lips. Psalm 119:103 said, "How sweet are your words, like honey to my mouth." And this also is not the first time that an angel or someone from heaven has told a prophet to eat the words of God. It's happened one other time in Ezekiel's, and both those events relate to each other. So we're going to spend a little bit of time in Ezekiel because, again, both these events relate to each other, and we'll kind of tie these together in just a moment. But we're going to go to Ezekiel 2, starting in verse 8. Now what's taking place in Ezekiel was he had just seen the throne of God, and he just saw the 4 living creatures, which John had also seen. So if we pick it up in 2 verse 8. "But you, son of man, hear what I say to you. Do not be rebellious like the rebellious house. Open your mouth and eat what I give you. Now when I looked, there was a hand stretched out to me, and behold, a scroll of a book was in it. Then he spread it before me, and there was written on the inside, And on the outside and written on it were lamentations and mournings and woe. Now, I want to kind of pause there. We're going to continue here, but I want to pause there because what Ezekiel is seeing written in this is lamentations, that's expressing of grief, mournings, which is deep sadness of loss, and then woes, which is great sorrow and distress. And I want to remind you, John is in the middle of 3 woes. All right, we'll pick it up back up where we left off in Ezekiel 3, verse 1. Moreover, he said to me, Son of man, eat what you find, eat this scroll, and go speak to the house of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he caused me to eat that scroll. And he said to me, Son of man, feed your belly, and fill your stomach with this scroll that I give you. So I ate it, and it was in my mouth like honey and sweetness. A couple things familiar in these stories, however, they again relate to each other. Ezekiel just saw the throne of God in chapter 1 of Ezekiel, and he saw the 4 living creatures. And as he eats the book, he's told to prophesy, just like John was told to prophesy. Now we're going to jump to Ezekiel 3, verse 12. Then the Spirit lifted me up, and I heard behind me a great thunderous voice. Blessed is the glory of the Lord from his place. I also heard the noise of the wings of the living creatures that touched one another, and the noise of the wheels beside them, and a great thunderous noise. So the Spirit lifted me up and took me away, and I went in bitterness in the heat of my spirit. But the hand of the Lord was strong upon me. So he also senses this bitterness. Now I want to talk about that bitterness for a moment before we get into how these stories relate to each other. The Word of God, what John and what Ezekiel are experiencing is they're consuming the Word of God. They're almost becoming biblical experts, like in a split second. And it's something about the Word of God. If you're a true believer in God and your heart is with God, there's going to be things in here that you're not going to like. There's going to be things in here that are going to remind you of yourself and your own sinful ways, and they're going to just make you feel kind of bitter. Oftentimes people will take the Word of God and they just want to make it sweet like honey to their lips, but they don't want it to be bitter to their stomach. So they keep those parts out, or they try to ignore those parts. It's very, very important that we don't do that. So now we're just going to kind of jump back again in Ezekiel to 3:4. And he said to me, Son of man, go to the house of Israel and speak with my words to them. For you are not sent to a people of unfamiliar speech and hard language, but to the house of Israel. So ultimately what Ezekiel is told here is he's told that you're going to be prophesying and speaking to the house of Israel, not many nation, tongues, and kings, just Israel. Yet John is then told in chapter 10, verse 11, and he said to me, you must prophesy again about many peoples, nations, tongues, and kings. So Ezekiel is told to eat a scroll and prophesy about Israel. John is told to eat a scroll and prophesy about many peoples, nations, tongues, and kings. And ultimately what they're both doing is they're told to eat these scrolls and then prophesy to the 2 witnesses. And that's the very next chapter in Revelation. As a matter of fact, the very next verses are about these 2 witnesses, the nation of Israel and the Gentiles. And that's kind of where we're going to hit it next, is who are these 2 witnesses? In my opinion, this is one of the most important passages to us, because this is finally what our role in all of this is. And a lot of you said, well, what are we to be doing during this time? And how are we to be the remnant of Jesus Christ? How are we supposed to stand up for Jesus when the church is not? That's where we're getting into exactly next. So again, Ezekiel's told to prophesy to one of the witnesses, and then John's told to prophesy to the other witness. It's a really fascinating bit of verses here. Hope this is helping. Love to hear your thoughts on it. Put it in the comments below. If you like this video, click like and subscribe. If you feel called to support our channel through Patreon, that link is also below. But the most important part of this channel is we take prayer requests. Never hesitate to send that in. This is a ministry to us, and we really take this part serious, so never hesitate to send that in. Thank you for watching this episode of God, Family, and Guns. And as always, love God, love your family, and love guns.